just over 40,000 professional planners globally across 30 countries. So it's a pleasure to be here with you today and to moderate this session. I'm really looking forward to our speakers. And without wasting any more of your time, let's just jump right in. Our first speaker is Michael Brooks, and he is the Chief Executive Officer at RealPAC. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks very much. I think we have a video recording of my speech to fit it in. Ozan, over to you.
Thank you. I'll play right now.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Brooks, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of a Canadian national trade association called RealPAC. We represent institutional real estate owners of all asset types in all types of municipalities, coast to coast to coast, including particularly purpose-built rental apartment buildings. And I'm here to talk at this third Collingwood World Summit on Habitat in Towns about affordable housing. We have a difficult situation in Canada now with affordability, particularly around rental. And governments at all levels are looking for solutions to that issue. What are the problems that we're dealing with? Well, certainly in situations involving existing buildings, it's the tension between the need to repair and maintain these old buildings while at the same time keeping rents affordable. If those rents are raised too quickly, often we will leave those on fixed incomes, those in more difficult economic circumstances behind. And that is a wicked problem for everyone to manage. Governments, not-for-profits, including the private sector. And the private sector has been criticized for raising rents without regard to those who have more difficulty keeping up. So the problem that we characterize it is the tension between naturally occurring affordable housing and the need to repair and maintain these older buildings, no matter where they are, including in smaller towns. How do we solve this problem nationally? Well, I think all governments, certainly all provincial governments, agree that increasing supply is a key part of the solution, but sometimes that doesn't find its way down into smaller towns and cities. How do we make sure that we can increase supply or maintain affordable housing in those cities? Often we think about new buildings as a partial solution, but the problem with new construction is that they are 2 or 3 times more expensive to build than an existing building. If you look at the purchase price of a per unit of an existing apartment building and compare that to the construction cost of a new apartment building, the new building is 2 or 3 times the cost of an existing building. So it makes a lot of sense to try to maintain and grow existing stock wherever we can. Increasing the supply of housing, what's likely to increase it in your town or city? Firstly is to recognize the need for return on investment. Don't demonize profit. Profit is what brings entrepreneurs into your town and city to build more housing, even if it's building more market housing, even if it's luxury housing. The trickle-down theory would suggest that that will pull people out of the lower end apartments who can afford it into those new units and free up those lower end apartments. So that's one consideration to keep in mind. Secondly, I would say reducing the capital costs of new construction should help as well. If you have government land that you can roll in for free, even on a long-term ground lease to allow the construction of purpose-built rental, that would be one possibility. Obviously, taking advantage of government grants and loans would be another opportunity to reduce the cost of new build. And for existing buildings, it's important to think about ways to work with the private sector to safeguard vulnerable tenants in those buildings. Not maintaining the building is not a solution. You have to maintain these buildings. In fact, we're under a lot of pressure as a society to green those buildings as well. And that requires a lot of capital expenditures. So a better solution is to allow the return on investment that those repairs and replacements and greening efforts would necessitate, but protect those who might be left behind with portable housing benefits, rent supplements, and those types of programs. That's efficient. It targets those most in need. And I think that approaching it that way would offer your town, your city, the best chance of protecting your most vulnerable tenants. Thank you. This has been Michael Brooks from RealPAC. Enjoy the conference.
Thank you, Michael, for that video. Videos are always great because then they can convert, like you prevent interruptions and the flow just happens. So that's fabulous. Thanks for putting that together. Okay, I'd like to invite, I should say as well that we're going to reserve all questions until the end of the presentations today. And I also should have said to the speakers who aren't using videos, because one of our speakers unfortunately wasn't able to make it, that gives you an extra 2 minutes to go ahead and speak. So that's always fun too. So I'm going to invite our next speaker, Raj Andagar, who's the co-founder of the Samrakshan, India. Welcome, Raj.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. Thanks for inviting us. It is 4:20 in Sydney, Australia. So it's nice to welcome you all and join. So Samrakshan India is a trust, operates from the southern part of India, a place called a small village. So we are also closely work with Andagiri architects. So I would like to start with some slides, if I could. Can I share the screen for slides, Eleanor?
I think Ozan has to give you permission if you can't already see it.
Could you try?
Okay, let me try again. Share screen. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
I'll adjust it, Ozan. Just give me a second.
Yeah. No.
It should work now, Raj.
Okay, thank you for that. Let me see. Here we go. Is that working?
It works. Please continue.
Okay. So I would like to start with a little code. It's very important for what we do. By Activio paths, that to be truly modern, we must first reconcile ourselves with our tradition. So I'll come back to this. So I grew up in a small rural town in southern India. So during the 1980s, it's a little story. Is actually, we keep coming back to this. So the houses in the below are the village houses. So there was a rich man living on the top of the hill. So he had a house quite different to the rest of the village. So the aspiration for common normal villagers were to have a house just like that, one which is a flat roof, but people forgot to see there's a small boxes attached to the side. There are air conditions, but it was too much small details to notice. So that was their aspiration. If they want to build a house, just should be like that. So now, another 40 years later, I'll tell you, the houses modules, the type of typology has changed. The majority of the houses look like that. But now the rich man, the chief of the village, he's thinking, oh, what do we do? Everyone's building the similar houses as me. So he's thinking, so, and it's a small encouraging fact. It is changing. So he's gone back to the traditional houses. So there is a wisdom in it. So he or she thinks that these other houses are most appropriate for today, and there's also sustainability and weather patterns are also in consideration. So I'm come back to this picture. So we all know that the mass migration from rural to urban, India is one of the forefront of it. So it is putting all kind of toll on the villages as well, small rural cities in India. So the dynamics of rural villages and small cities are changing. The more money, more wealth is coming back to village and rural area, and that is changing. One of the first things that affects is the built environment, which is houses mostly. So it is changing rapidly. So myself and my brother is also an architect. We work together. So we would be traveling in these villages and cities, taking pretty pictures. Then you come back week or month or year later, then you left with this nothing. You ask people around, what happened to that building? There was something here. People are like, oh, yeah, they just moved on. They want to build a new house. So then you come back again after 5 months or a year, then you see this completely a disconnected building over there, or a house. So this used to be like a beautiful city or a village or a old traditional house has been changing. So what we decided, like, what do we do as architects? We do have a social responsibility also to the public. So we started Samrakshan India. What we do is we document these old houses, different regions, and then sometimes we give suggestions to the clients how we can, or the owners, how we can restore. It is not only just documenting, we collecting stories of people who live there or in the street. Sometimes it's private houses, sometimes it's actually public houses. So this is one of the it is all volunteers. We're all volunteers going to places, different parts of South India. So we travel, we document, take stories, notes, and then we produce sketches and photographs and document them. This is one of the examples. This is a urban fabric in small rural town. Mostly it's in rural and rural towns and villages. So it's a stepped well. We document with stories and some photographs. So we learned a lot of things from this. So going through and listening and hearing and seeing these places, so we begin to understand there are different type of solution we could probably offer, which is an alternative to a traditional what's happening today. It is the construction and the way it's been rapidly moving, and it is completely a foreign. It is not appropriate to the weather or the culture. So in a way, these stories are being lost. Traditional houses and climate appropriate is being lost. There's a whole lot of pressure on developing world. So we started giving an alternative solution to the society in a way, like private and public sector. So we started with 3. So this is actually a bottom-up approach we tried to introduce. So there's the rammed earth wall, but we didn't have much success in there. We had a lot of failure. One of the first picture was like we tried to crowdsource some funds, and we built a house in rammed earth, completely different to what's around. But with the pressure of local and neighbors, the owner has to tear it down, this house. So there's a stigma on materiality, typology of houses, and we didn't have much success. So we continued to work on this. And next, we thought, let's try from the top down, where the village story comes back here again, probably the rich and people who have the knowledge about the what's currently going. You could always also say jumping on the bandwagon of green and sustainability, which is also working in our favor. So we had some success building more locally appropriate, climatic appropriate houses and public buildings. So one of the far the below here in black and white picture, it's actually a science museum. It's one of the first government-owned building which is completely of alternative technology. So we had to change, with the help of others, the building code of Karnataka state in south of India to adopt these technologies and techniques, which is 400-400-year-old techniques. So it is also a progressing, which is really a nice sign. So what the most important, what we are tackling here is sort of the middle range where we can provide solutions to, you know, the growing middle class India. These are like prefab houses. This is a 5,000-year-old technology, what we're using, wattle and daub. This is packed and ready to ship to another place and build and assemble, can be demountable as well. So we are trying to have these sort of varieties and available technologies and techniques to the people and also private clients. So Samrakshan India is sort of the knowledge, and Andhagiri Architects where we actually implement those knowledge. So we work together in hand. So going forward with these experiences and working in the different sectors and different socioeconomic background, what we find is these are the sort of a recommendation what we can give today to the speakers and everyone listening. And this applies to India, also to developing world around the world. And to set up these knowledge centers, what we lost today is that knowledge, what we had in some of the developing world, what we had 50, 100, 200, 300 years ago, because these are solutions are well tested in time. When I talk about these well tested, we still have buildings and structures 300, 400, 500 years and standing the time and responding to the different climatic conditions. So what we would like to see is setting up these regional knowledge centers in different climatic zones, let's say in south of India, different parts, where there will be a research and development for built environment, which is for houses and you know, we have to bring back those knowledge. Some of them are lost and forgotten, so we need to bring them back and continuous research on this, and also available building techniques and materials for an individual walks in, you know, whether it's a different demography and so and there's so many different types of techniques. Well, what can be suitable for that region and for the weather, and the most important now today in a country like India, rapidly changing middle class. We all know the highest spender, also the biggest in the world. We are losing a lot of the skills for many other things. So we need to build those skills on. The lastly, but not the least, the finance, and it's probably one of the most important. Right now, these alternative technologies and sustainable houses cost more than traditional, normal the houses. So there has to be some kind of loan system, or I'm not sure, I'm not really good at finance, but we can actually go forward with those sort of financial help. So I would like to end it here. So this has been great. Thank you for giving us a chance. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Raj. A great presentation and definitely some interesting case study within there to provide some examples for us. I thought it was really interesting.
Thank you.
So I hope we'll have some good questions for you when we get to the end.
Sure.
Okay, our next speaker who will be joining us today is Crystal Valencia, and Crystal is the Director of Development for Home Sweet Hope. Welcome, Crystal.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. And am I able to share my screen as well? Just as that's being set up. I thank you so much for having me today, to Reza and Fazale and everyone here. I wanted to, at these events, it's difficult because we talk about the what, we talk about different alternatives and potential resolutions. But what I want to bring you back to, and what I want to really emphasize in this presentation, is the who. So who is truly being affected by the housing that is being built or not being built. And so I have a quick video from a mom who is in our programs that I'd like to share with all of you.
Affordable housing to me means being able to pay your rent based on your income, based on what you make monthly, and still being able to have some money left over to pay your other bills, such as your car, insurance, groceries, diapers, formula, hydro. So I definitely think for me personally, it's important that it's geared to my income, because that way I'm able to budget and know how much money is left over for other things that are needed, not just rent. So, yeah.
And the importance of bringing this up is because at Home Sweet Hope, we have, since 2015, we've been able to help hundreds of women, including Kendra that you saw in that video, and their families through the Halton region and the town of Oakville get back on their feet from homelessness. Moving forward, however, we hope to increase our capacity to help others and improve their lives. And through a current 3-year plan, we're hoping to create more gender sensitive cooperative housing within towns that can be scalable across Canada, and to ensure that the cooperative housing provides the best possible experience and opportunities for our participants. Home Sweet Hope is working on creating a circular economy within housing, as well as acting on some of the issues that can arise within cooperative housing. And the problem that we really recognize today is that participants in our program face the lack of affordable housing options within towns and regions. And with the rising cost of living and rent prices that people are experiencing worldwide, people are spending way more than 30% of their monthly income, and it's becoming harder and harder to achieve even that. This is especially true for women and single parent led families who are relying on only one source of income. So what our goal is to do through this is by encouraging the circular economy, both socially and financially, we hope to build a living environment which encourages women to help other women and then have those women to also pay it forward and help women in the future who might enter this program. And through this kind of building of a housing economy around the building of actual housing, we hope that this can build a foundation to programming that can self-perpetuate and can be able to help women and single mothers for years to come, beyond whether or not Home Sweet Hope even exists, or whether or not our organizations exist at that point. One of the primary goals in creating this cooperative housing is to help really empower and improve one another. I could have told you the story of Kendra, but how much more impactful is it when you hear it from the person themselves, from the voice themselves? And that is a core tenet of how we envision building out affordable housing, where yes, you can talk to, single parents and builders and architects and all of the experienced people within the housing development sphere, but it's important to also include those who are directly impacted by the housing that would be developed. And by creating the circular social economy within this program, women will be able to move forward as a cooperative housing model as they also progress and improve in their independent lives. So that would also mean that that rent geared to income would truly be rent geared to income, or even like equity geared to income if they were to buy into a unit. So ensuring that our affordable housing and sustainable housing is truly dynamic, in that it will continue to change with the ever-changing needs of families and those who are living within it, is how we envision affordable housing to continue building and for housing to be sustainable for years to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Crystal. Okay, I think our next speaker is actually coming in through video, and I think Ozan I'm
Yes,
hoping you have control of this video. So it's Yangping Zhu, who is the associate professor for Xi'an Jiaotong Liverpool University in China.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yunqing Xu from XJTLU in China. Thank you very much for inviting me again. And the topic I'm going to discuss is about sustainable housing and financing, particularly in the context of housing financialization. We know that building has a huge environmental impact, and residential sector accounts 50% of the urban carbon emissions. In this context, China is also growing very fast with about 2 billion square meters being built every year. Around the world, we have various efforts being taken, such as this sustainable housing, which has a huge potential in terms of energy saving. We also have this zero carbon village, where it uses energy from renewable resources and limit parking space and encouraging sustainable living style for about 100 households. More recently, we have seen projects which link to the zero carbon village, where we have more from the regulated energy use to unregulated energy use sector. And in Asia, we have seen that a larger project has been initiated to the extent of 30 square kilometer, where basically there is no cars above ground and all dominated for park, vertical green and green roof systems. Basically, it's creating a new kind of low carbon and green living style and living environment for people. Having said that, the challenge for low carbon development is still very immense. Take the case of China, it has set up these dual carbon goals, which in context of its rapid urbanization, industrialization, and so on, the time left is very intense. And it is notable that not only the new completions increasing rapidly, but China has accumulated to a stock of over 80 billion square meter of building sector already. And in the recent wave of urban regeneration, for the old residential communities, for example, it's already amounted for 160,000 of them, waiting for investment about 4 trillion RMB. So both the sustainable housing sector has a huge potential, but also a request for huge financing to support it. Therefore, we argue that probably it's a moment for us to consider to expand more from those kind of demonstration of single building community to more kind of a city and larger scale, and to extend not only from the new building, but also have a focus on the green retrofitting of all the existing stocks. And of course, to support this, we need to further industrialize the green building sector and extend its industrial chain. Very often we see this kind of vicious circle of blame where different actors are not reluctant to make their efforts because of other reasons. So to turn this into a virtuous circles where everyone puts an effort in, first of all, we need to make an economic case of this low carbon building and make this benefits being well known to the widely public. But this is quite challenging, especially in the context that we have this massive housing financialization going on around the world, while housing is treated more as investment rather than spaces to be used. But we also see increasing efforts being seen, which is rather encouraging, such as in China, we have been shifting from the old demolishing and redevelopment model towards more renovation about the services and management to a long-term basis with better understanding of people's needs. We also start to imagine the future living, which involves vertical green, larger space of greening, and also urban agriculture spaces. Having said that, we should not only think about more widely applicable to the existing building in terms of developing sustainable housing, but we should also think about how to build a kind of complete system to support this. And of course, when we compare to the system between China and the UK, for example, we can see this pattern about bottom up and top down differences. While China has a strong kind of political and central push to move this forward, but there is still a lack of market kind of supply in terms of knowledge, technologies, services, standardization, and all those kind of a professionalism and supply chain to support this. Therefore, we also believe that there are potentially a good chance for those kind of original and different markets comparison as well as cooperation to meet each other's gap and also to help to build this kind of a system. So therefore, at our center, besides the green retrofitting project, which we recently complete by comparing UK and China, we are also having another ongoing project which is named a low carbon life pavilion. This is a project that we start from the human's perspective and considering how we can change people's behavior and lifestyle into low carbon through the collective efforts from university, enterprises, as also government. Therefore, we very much look forward to continue our exchange at this platform and hope we can also have a more collaboration in a common interest. Thank you very much again for inviting me, and I wish the summit will have a great success.
That was a really interesting presentation. What I've enjoyed today is actually the different perspectives that are coming forward and different ideas. And I just really appreciate it because there's new things even to my practice that I think, whoa, you know, I should be thinking about that too. Okay, our last speaker that we had scheduled for today, Doug Pawson, unfortunately couldn't make it. So that opens up quite a bit of time for us to have a discussion or to answer any questions that anyone has. So let's start with questions. Does anyone have any questions about the presentations today? Please go ahead, Marg. I see your hand up.
Thanks, Eleanor. I guess my question is for Michael, who I always enjoy listening to. When I hear the reference to supply and the trickle-down theory, I have to admit I brace a little bit. I've been working in this space for over 30 years, and I have seen repeatedly that that doesn't work in terms of specifically affordable housing. The other thing we know is that in Canada, I believe it is 31% of homes are owned by investors, whether that's single properties or REITs. And that number has been increasing alongside the problem of affordable housing. So I wonder sometimes, what if that were turned on its head? What if there were not-for-profit REITs that investors were directing money into that had social purpose as a defined outcome as opposed to return for shareholders? And just really interested in your thoughts on that, Michael, because I know I've heard you muse about that in other venues. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, this is a continuous struggle. Look, there's room for everybody in the sector, not-for-profit, governments, the private sector. I would say is proposition number one. The not-for-profit sector, the problem is it's so small. I had a meeting with New Market Funds, which is Derek Ballantyne on the board of CMHC. They're trying to raise money to build more affordable housing, and they got to knock on a lot of doors, and it's hard to scale it. As soon as you offer a return on investment to investors, you get the ability to scale. So that's what you're talking about REITs and others. There's a lot of misinformation being thrown around, particularly on social media. The REITs in Canada are only 6% of the primary market. That's apartment buildings. Only 3% of the primary and secondary market after 29 years. They're not your villain, nor are the pension funds, which themselves own a lot of apartments, although increasingly in the US, where the returns are better and the approval timelines are shorter. We have a competitive disadvantage in this country. So I do believe there's a role for the private sector. I do believe that the institutional segment of private sector ownership does have a heart. We are taking the criticisms to heart and thinking about how can we be better as a group. So yeah, I mean, one of my members on the trickle down theory, we always point to US cities like Seattle. If 4 tenants have a choice of 5 apartments, what happens? Rents start to go down. There's a race to the bottom. If 5 tenants have a choice of 4 apartments, rents go up because it's the landlords know they have pricing power. The lowest rents in Canada in the last 3 years increase. This is Yardi data. Yardi runs the back end of all the apartment owners, Alberta and Saskatchewan. You won't like to hear this, but what's unique about Alberta and Saskatchewan? No rent control. 1.7 and 1.9%, lowest increase in 3 years. So I think there's a lot of misinformation. I'm, as you know, engaged with the ship and Leilani and talking with her and trying to understand everybody's perspectives. And I just think we all need to sit across the table from each other. That's what and including you, Mark, I'd love to sit across the table with you and understand better what you're seeing, what you're hearing. Same with Crystal. She had a great presentation with what Crystal's talking about. I'm on the board of Eva's initiatives in Toronto. It's a homeless shelter for youth. I'm on the board of Toronto Foundation. We are giving social grant money to organizations to keep housing affordable. So I've got a pretty good grounding on that side of it. I think the private sector wants to do more, but I do think that supply is part of the solution.
If I can just jump in there too, Michael, Mark, when it comes to the social sector and trying to acquire, I guess, existing community-owned land, that is kind of a priority, at least from the Halton Region's perspective, in where people are trying to, where, for example, the Salvation Army is trying to offload some of the existing land that they have in their portfolio. We are proposing within the region that a nonprofit would be prioritized in acquiring that land before it goes public into the market. And so that is something that we've been in negotiations with. Another potential solution that we've explored is partnering with existing for-profit entities in trying to, I guess, say if we have a plot of land or we have a donor who wants to donate a plot of land, actually owning shared equity in the for the I guess the cost of the housing after it's been built. So say we're donated a land that's worth $3 million. And after it's being built, after we give it to the developer, and the clause is that after it's built, we own what is equivalent to $3 million in that existing land. So there's certainly solutions that we've been trying to, that the nonprofit sector has been trying to negotiate with the for-profit sector. I think it's also just a matter of trying to ensure that we're on the same page, that although for-profit entities tend to make profits from they will make profits from the existing builds, more often than not, it actually is they rely on the inflation rates that increase the value of the housing, and they only really profit about 20% of the 20% from the capital build and the huge risk that they're taking on. So there is a lot of, I think, misconceptions maybe within the nonprofit sector and the for-profit sector, as well as what the municipal legislature or the provincial legislature can even do in terms of actually facilitating those conversations. So that was just what I wanted to add.
Thanks for that, Crystal. Robert, I see your hand up there. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm a new councillor elect in Meaford, and just looking at, of course, we're no different than everybody else experiencing the same issues. I do have a question, maybe Mr. Brooks could address. Just getting my feet wet in a lot of new kind of provincial legislation. So when the province has kind of put inclusionary zoning in place to mandate affordable units, new developments. I presume, again, in a large urban center like Toronto, where if you're building a very large multi-residential project, that's a small percentage would end up potentially being beneficial because a small percentage. Is that going to actually help small municipalities where the projects are so much smaller? Is it realistic to kind of hold the developer's feet to the fire to say that you're building a 100 residential project and now you've got to dedicate 5% to that? Just wonder if you could address that kind of particular legislation.
Yeah, thanks, Robert, and thanks for running. I'm glad there's people like you representing us in a democratic environment. So thanks for taking that jump. Inclusionary zoning. Well, what I would say about it is that it all depends on the pro forma. You can talk to some not-for-profits these days, and they'll tell you that building new purpose-built rental without any affordable, just market, many of those deals are just, they don't pencil out anymore. Construction costs are too high, or taxes are too high, or they can't get equity money, or the cost of construction debt is too high. So it all starts with the pro forma. As a councillor in a small town, I would say get to know your developers and sit down with them and raise that issue with them. Look, if we approve your project, can you provide some affordable housing units for how long a period? How much, what's the standard? How much below market rents in this town already? And I think that's the way it happens in a lot of municipalities. It turns into a conversation, particularly with those local developers who call, your town Meaford home. So that's what I would say. The City of Toronto, the problem was that the special interest groups, of course, were in front of council demanding a higher inclusionary zoning rent rate, as if the purpose-built rental bills would just go ahead and build it. The problem was the developer said, sorry, but this doesn't pencil out. So you know what, I'm going to go to Austin, Texas, where I don't have this brain damage, that kind of thing. So it's all about the pro forma, and it's going to be different in every town. Hope that helps, Robert.
That's great. Do any of our other speakers have anything to add about that at all? One thing I will say is I wear another hat. So not just the president of the Commonwealth Association of Planners. I also work as a senior planner for the government of Prince Edward Island, and their housing and rents have doubled. Like, it's insane what has happened on this small little island. And the reason for that is partly my fault. People from away is what they call us, who have moved to Prince Edward Island from other places in Canada, and who are used to paying more for housing and paying more for rent. So it's exponentially, like, it's increased everything across the board for Islanders. And it's now, we're an unaffordable place, not as bad as Toronto or other places in Ontario, but we're certainly on our way. And if you look at it, the context of Prince Edward Island, rents that were $700 have now gone to $1,500 for different units. So if you can imagine, if you were an Islander and your rent has increased that much, it's an incredible shock to the system and very unaffordable. So we also have been looking at inclusionary zoning. Our challenges with inclusionary zoning is you really need density. And it's what Michael was talking about. It's about that pro forma, like the dollars and cents of the developer. How much does the land cost? How much are those construction costs? Can you even get people to construct things? That's another challenge we have here on this island. So how do you overcome these challenges? And I think for the professionals who work across this field and the politicians as well, is we can look for the larger big city examples, and they're great, but you really have to look at your own context. And what is affordable in your community may not be the same as affordable in downtown Toronto. So there's some differences there. And then what does inclusionary zoning or other incentives look like in smaller communities or even more rural communities? And that's where it gets really, really challenging. Because from my research so far, and I would, if anyone else has any more that they can provide here, there's not a lot of examples out there in terms of solutions once you're out of high density environments for this affordable housing issue.
It may seem self-serving, Eleanor, to just jump in here, but we've been spending a bit of time recently with the US's Inflation Reduction Act. And the Inflation Reduction Act it's about clean tech, Crystal, and a lot of interesting ideas in there around clean tech, and Raj as well. But what's most interesting about that act, and maybe it's unique to the US system, it's all carrots, no sticks. The problem with inclusionary zoning is it's a stick. And it's going to be a binary decision for a developer. Does this project pencil out or not? Whereas if it was carrot based, you probably have more of a take up with it. And I would challenge everybody to think about carrots more than sticks.
Absolutely. And I also think, like, in terms of this affordable housing challenge, it's not about just one tool. It's about many tools to serve many different folks. So whether it's not for profit or profit driven, what that looks like. And then also, you know, there's subsidization by government, then there's also the regulation piece and what that looks like as well. Any other questions at all? Fazila, please.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed from the great speeches that our speakers presented today. My question is for Krista. I am very excited about your cooperative housing plans, Krista. My question is, what is the main criteria for this kind of housing? And I would like to know, how much do you think that this kind of housing can be duplicated in the other countries or other communities as well? Thank you.
Definitely. So to answer your first question, Fazile, I think what we're trying to do at Home Sweet Hope first is better understand what the criteria really is for single parents, in that, you know, what is the, how many bedrooms do parents need? How big is a kitchen? What is the minimal size of a kitchen? Do you really need an oven, or are you open to working, you know, in a community space to, you know, use to bake a turkey once 3 times a year kind of thing, and then have a kitchenette inside your unit? What does security look like? And generally speaking, we would just expect that the parent is lower income, that they have 1 to 3 dependents, because we recognize that's about how much you know, in a condominium you could hold. Anything above that would require a house, which is not something that we're exploring as of right now. And I guess even just trying to you know, lay out what that standard kind of should be for families versus what it is today, in that, you know, we're trying to fit a mom and her kids in a 1-bedroom apartment, which just isn't suitable for them. And then to answer your second question about scalability into other countries, this gender sensitive housing actually already exists in many countries. Something that we're exploring right now is, you know, actually something that I was going to even add into my presentation, but I ended up cutting out, is that you know, we want to send representatives to places like Chicago, Toronto, Vancouver, Vienna, and Vienna is actually where gender sensitive housing started in 1995 and is now one of the standardized acts with the UN Habitat. But we're really trying to figure out what the recurring problems are in this gender sensitive cooperative housing, and ensure that we take steps to address these issues from the get-go. And that way we're not continually making the same mistakes. We're learning and iterating and taking what we already know and what we know already works, and trying to do it here so that, you know, maybe other countries can do it better and iterate from their end too. So yeah, so to answer your second question, it already exists and we're just trying to learn from them too.
Perfect, thank you.
Pleasure.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the question, Priscilla, and thanks for the answer. Crystal, I see Jack, you have your hand up.
Yes, thanks, Eleanor. Again, I'm going to pose a question to Michael. Sorry for picking on you, Michael, but I think your experience.
I think he's gone now, Jack. I think
Oh,
he's
maybe someone else. He's smart. So something we've been working on here is like a pro forma to try to understand what impact incentives have on affordability. And our challenge is we haven't been able to test it against anybody because, again, they're somewhat fictitious. I'm an accountant, so I guess I know how to work with numbers, but I have no idea how to build a building and what the costs are. And of course, those costs are increasing. And so maybe someone else has some experience here. We did discover that there is not one incentive that is going to solve the problem. However, if you combine incentives, but that the municipality can bring, that the region can bring, that CMHC can bring in terms of reducing interest rates, combine those, you will be able to create more affordable housing. And to Mark's point, in a not-for-profit model, these incentives have to work. I think the carrot and stick that Michael was talking about, I think is critical. If we're going to give incentives, there needs to be some contractual recognition for the builder, for the developer, for whoever, that a certain number of those units are going to be affordable into perpetuity. I think one of the challenges that we've had is that we give incentives, but then we don't attach conditions to them. So sorry that Michael is gone. Maybe he'll find this, maybe he'll find me back and maybe we can chat offline, but it's a question that we have. And does anybody have any experience with this?
Go ahead, Chris. I see you unmute, so.
I know that that's actually been a huge struggle that we faced in terms of negotiating with for-profit developers, where they will not even sign an MOU unless there is a sunset clause attached. So there is no perpetuity, there is no long-term ownership or transference of ownership. It's 99% of the time strictly been a sunset clause and strictly been 10-year or 20-year periods. So I've been experiencing the same thing that you have, to be totally honest.
If any other participants know anything, please you're welcome to jump in at any time. It doesn't just have to be speakers. I see Steve's hand up. Now, my question for Steve is this to respond to Jack, or is this a new question, Steve?
No, it's semi-responding. Again, I am a councillor, third term for Meaford. We had a major developer approach us to drop our development charges, which would work in the affordable housing scheme. So I asked the developer point blank in front of everybody, can you guarantee me that if we drop the development charges, that money would flow back to the residents and not in your pocket? And he would not answer that question. So it does have to fall into some guarantees if any of these incentives are going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll share that the research that I had to do, and you know how it works at provinces where there's a request from a minister and you have to produce very quickly. In the research I was doing into inclusionary zoning, part of that was looking at incentives as well. And in the academic research that I came across, there seemed to be more of a negative viewpoint that they couldn't get the incentives right to make them work for everyone. But that said, I mean, Jack, if you have discovered a model and it is gold, we need to test that and get it out there and, you know, start using that. And I think with this affordable housing challenge that we all have, we really have to start thinking about things in different ways and testing out. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. We just keep moving on and looking for new tools and new solutions.
Yeah, thank you for that, Eleanor. Ontario actually does have, I think, an app where you can actually plug in your different variables to determine the profitability or lack of profitability on a project. I'm not sure how up to date it is, and I think there's some other elements that you could throw into it, which at the Institute for Southern Georgian Bay, we've been working with SI Canada. And one of the things we put out to them was, would you be able to make this into a research project that could be a tool that could be applied across the country? And then we've given a bunch of variables that you could throw in there. They haven't responded to us yet. We're still not finished this project, but hey, someday we'll get it. And I'd love to contribute to it.
Yeah.
Jack, I know that Altus Developments has an
Yes.
existing app that, yeah, their calculator, which is updated every 3 months. And
Yes.
as a not-for-profit, something we've been talking to them about is getting a collaborative of nonprofits together so that we could have one user name for it, but all of us contribute about $200 or up to $500 to get access to that app for a year. And that way all of us can actually get that information and use the calculator and use the development tool. So.
Okay, thanks for that, Crystal. I'll look that up. I know that Altus is a big, they have a big database on building costs, et cetera, which I've used in my model. But I'll take a look to see if if I can find what you're talking about. Thanks.
That's great. Any other questions at all? One thing that there's a planner, their name is Cheryl Case, and they're the owner of CP Planning in Ontario. And she's been onto something that I'm fascinated by and haven't been able to dig in a little further, but I'm curious to see if anyone on here has any exposure to it. So a lot of the corporations, we keep hearing about ESG, environmental social governance. And often when we see ESG, we see it being tied to like climate change, adaptation or mitigation or environmental projects. They're planting trees, they're doing things like that. What we don't hear enough about is the social pillar of ESG. And if much of the private sector is buying into this model that they need to put this as a measurement in their corporations, what I'm wondering, and what Cheryl had raised, even in relation to pension funds, was how can we get the private sector to focus more on that social pillar, and how can we take that and kind of funnel it into affordable housing? So I'm just curious if anyone else has heard anything about that or any success stories in that area. Might be new to some of you too. Nothing. Okay, well, I guess I'm on my own and still trying to figure that out.
I've worked with Cheryl on another project that she's doing for the housing supply challenge. It's like the roadmap for redevelopment plans to confront systemic racism. So it's not quite, I assume that that's one pillar that will then, filter as a KPI to that broader roadmap of social of measurement of the S in ESG. But yeah, no, that's really quite interesting. I'll email her.
Yeah, well, it's just a curiosity of how we can take advantage of that in terms of affordable housing.
Yeah.
Now everyone will be jumping to the social pillar to try and get their social things in there, but I think housing could be a really good component. Robin, I see you have put something into the comments. Did you want to speak out loud, or did you just want to stay in the comments section?
So like, I think it's essential that we can address some of these issues with stronger partnerships. So we have Habitat for Humanity, and basically if development fees are waived, the savings goes directly to that home buyer. Deferring them isn't really an answer to the problem, because it keeps those first-time home buyers locked in that home longer than needs to be and slows down the turnover of building the new home. I think it's one solution. Like, I think our housing crisis has to be solved in a lot of different ways, but this is just one of many, and it's something, you know, the format is there. And if we have a model, say quadplex or duplex or something like that we know can be quickly approved and streamlined through the system, and Habitat have that model or a number of different models, and can quickly you know, turn over and use donor dollars to create these. It's something that I think that we need to support.
Awesome. Thank you, Robin. Jack, I see you unmuted. Did you want to
Yeah,
add?
so, well, I could address that. Thank you for that, Robin. And we're on the same page on this. I think the challenge that we have at Habitat right now is being able to acquire land. The values have just skyrocketed, so we can't even start, let alone building a quad, for instance, which is in our long-term plan. We definitely have a multi-build model going forward, and we're changing our financial model as well as the mortgage model that our homeowners have. Again, it's very complicated. I'm not going to get into that here, but I'm glad to hear what you said on that, Robin. And I'm hoping that as Habitat, we can work together with all our municipalities to free up land and to enable more building. And yeah, it's critical. Right now, we're actually, this Saturday, we're welcoming a new family into our new home in Stayner. But man, I tell you, it was tough getting this thing built, and the costs were astronomical. Even with donated goods and with volunteer time, the cost is basically, well, it's lower than market, but not substantially enough to allow us to build a lot more. So these are the dilemmas we're facing. We're going to get through them, but we need partnerships, and that's really what we're looking for.
Right.
Little plug for Habitat.
Thanks, Jack. Marg, I see you've put a comment or an idea into the comments section. Did you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, I think in some areas, certainly of Canada, we're underutilizing community land trusts, which are an opportunity to create housing that's affordable in perpetuity. You know, this was a problem 30 years ago. It was a problem 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and it will be a problem 20, 30, and 40 years from now, right? So we have to, I think, look through a bigger lens. We have not-for-profit developers. We have the issues around financing, but you know, if there's a housing first policy for donated, let's say, surplus lands that go into a community land trust, where they now have an asset base or equity that they're able to tap into, which aids in financing. Combine that with the use of community bonds, with controlling the build out of the property, removing the need for profit. There are opportunities in that space. Particularly, we see more in British Columbia, where land trusts are combining with housing cooperatives, particularly in terms of the management of the assets of the land trust. So I have heard absolutely nothing in the last 2 days on this topic, yet it strikes me as a potential solution. And we've seen it work very successfully in Canada and the United States. Just interested in comment, and Crystal, I'm sure you have some thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Marg. Crystal?
I know that community land trusts work in Hamilton. That is something that has been super successful, and that so I live in Hamilton. I grew up in Hamilton, and so I'm seeing it today that people are interested in you know, the idea of a community land trust being kind of the connector between developers and the landowners. I think it's just a matter now of trying to build that out in other cities and towns where a lot of the land is actually privately owned and typically for profit owned. And how do we and so that's one issue. And then the second one that we've been experiencing is that when it's surplus land that's owned by the town or by the region, there are like millions of layers of red tape that we have to get through first until they'll even look at us as a potential option.
Right. Thank you, Crystal. And thank you, Mark, for your commentary on that. Raj, I see your hand up there.
Yeah, look, the affordable housing, the majority of the conversation is emphasized on affordability, how to bring lower the cost of building. Unfortunately, it is not happening, whether it's in Australia, where I live sometime, whether in India. But I think we should be putting a little bit of emphasis on different way of living, different typologies, demountable housing, for example, I've been very passionate about, where some of the government have land could only be leased for 20, 30, a shorter period of time, where we can actually build house, you know, a portion of society into, but meaningful, you know, a clever way of looking at you know, demountable structures or movable structure, where with all the amenities, you know, I'm not talking about trailer park, caravan parks or trailer parks. I'm not. So to give, you know, thought into those, and also like, you know, that requires change of legislation, change of, so in Melbourne, in Victoria, there are councils coming together to see, we're going to have a Commonwealth Games soon. Local communities looking at how can we increase population is in existing, whether to have a more access to people, for example, like movable houses on the driveway with you have an access to sewage and electrical connection to make it more sort of legal for, you know, certain number of years. So there is different councils are coming up with clever ideas, I think. And also another area we should be looking at is like a change of living behavior patterns, where we can share things, some of the, you know, communal, you know, whether, you know, when you build a community or a type of housing, so some of the services are co-shared or among other people. So there needs to be, I keep on, as an architect, I keep on looking at, you know, always affordability, affordable housing, most emphasis on the dollar value, you know, where we put very little value on or emphasis on other alternatives. There are plenty of amazing ideas around the world, and I think, you know, you just have to test and try it, I suppose.
Exactly, Raj. Thank you. Thank you for that. One thing that I really appreciated, it came out in a couple of our presentations today, was the repurposing factor. So I've heard about repurposing less in an affordable housing context and more from a climate change mitigation and context, and more so out of the UK. So because their buildings are so old there, what was happening, or what continues to happen, is developers want to knock down the old and then put up something new. But the argument from a lot of protesters is the amount of greenhouse gases that are created by building new, you're better to repurpose the old. So it's coming from a different angle, but I'm hearing it now out of today from our presentations from an affordable perspective, that we should be better at repurposing also what we have and maintaining what we have. I also think, though, and this would tie to sort of what you were talking about, Raj, building materials and the building materials that we use today versus what was used in the UK years and years ago are not as resilient to multiple homeowners over time. So the costs of maintaining are increased because you have to replace so much sooner than maybe what you might have used to. The houses just don't seem to be built in the same sort of way. I did notice that Voncel did make a comment in the comment box there. Voncel, did you want to speak about that at all, or would you like it just to stay in the comments? I'm going to take the silence as doesn't want to speak. And that's okay. That's why we have our comment box too. Are there any other questions, comments, or thoughts about our presentations today? Okay, I'm not seeing any. I really want to thank our speakers for speaking today and the presentations. They were really interesting, many different perspectives. And I also want to thank our participants. We stopped a little sooner than we had initially scheduled for, but I think we had some pretty good conversation here today, and I definitely have some takeaways from that. So thank you so much for attending and spending your time with us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Eleanor.
Thank you, Eleanor.
Thank you.